Hello everyone, I'm Glenn, maintaining the VS Code extension SASS Compiler. So I'm just doing this video as a quick guide on my recommendations on how to get started. So, shall we dive in? So, you've just installed the extension and you don't quite know where to start. Now, the first thing you're going to have to do is open a SASS file or a project containing a SASS file. Without that, my extension just won't start. So as you can see, the project I've got here contains a .scss file or a SASS file. And just down at the bottom down here, we've actually got this watch SASS. Now, as soon as you click this, a lot of things will happen. So just stop before you click that. I've actually got a few recommendations. So let me talk about those before you head diving on in. Now, my first recommendation is to have compile on watch turned off. So what this means is that when you start watching, it's not going to go through your whole project and start compiling every single file. If you only use VS Code, you're not going to edit them anywhere else, then obviously this can save a bit of startup time. You don't have to wait for a massive project of files to all be compiled before you can actually start working on it. Next, we have watch on launch. I recommend setting this to true. So what this means is that as soon as you launch up a new project, it's going to automatically start watching, and means you don't have to click the button just down at the bottom. Obviously, these two settings here I've used, and as you can see, as soon as I open this, it watched everything and hasn't output any files whatsoever over on the side there. Now, my next recommendation is to use a new compiler. SASS has actually deprecated the current compiler, and setting this setting to true just gives you a head start on the one that they're going to be enforcing in the SASS 2.0. There are a few caveats with that, but obviously you could check the full settings video to look into that more. So my next recommendation is to set show output window on to warning. Now, when you're saving files, you'll get an output window that pops up from the bottom just saying like when it started watching, when it started compiling. So setting this to warning just means that it'll only ever pop up when there's a warning or an error with the compilation process. So rather than having it completely off and not realizing why your changes haven't took effect, obviously just means that it's not popping up all the time and it only pops up when it's important. Now I'm going to talk about formats. So obviously the format setting will vary from project to project. Obviously this is just wanted to highlight the fact that my recommendation is to have two different outputs of different types. So I recommend having the first one of an expanded format. That obviously means that it's perfect for developer environments and also includes the map files. And then a second one that's a compressed format, has a different extension name, in this case -min, and also doesn't output a map file. So it just means that you're keeping the file as small as you can, don't need the map file in, and it's perfect for production environments. And before I move on to a few extra settings I want to talk about, I just want to quickly expand on how you can tweak the save paths. So obviously, as I said, every project's different, and the save path and save path replacement pairs is how you decide where you want to put out those files. So as you can see on the project just over here, I've got a main file which is in a SASS folder. Obviously, when I generate my CSS files, I don't want those to go into the SASS folder. So I instead want them to go into a CSS folder. There's two different ways of doing this. So you can do it from the save path. So what we can do is, we can say that when it just needs to start with a slash, and then I just want everything to be output in the CSS folder. So that means no matter which file I save down the side there, it's going to output it in a new folder called CSS. As you can see, I've got a different folder structure where that won't work. I've got a main file in SASS, I've got another main file that's underneath styles. So obviously there will be that overlap there, which means those files will be overwriting one another. Obviously we could at the same time start with a little tilde, I think that's how you say it. And what that means is you're going to start from the current file that you're saving, and then you can manipulate it from there. So you could say that from the current file I've saved, I want to move up a directory and then save it in a CSS folder, and then obviously it will do that for you. So that means that this particular one will move up to a folder called CSS and then save it in there. Same for that one, it'll move up a folder and then save it into CSS. And that's pretty much all it is for that. Obviously, just quickly talking about safe path replacement pairs. So let's just say that again, we'll look at that same main file in the SASS folder. And what I want to do is say that when it's saving the file, oops, I want to search for SASS in the folder path and actually replace that with CSS. So that means I could have many subfolders underneath here, and all it's going to do is it's going to take that SASS folder and replace the path with CSS. So it just means you'll keep your folder structure within there without having to do too much tweaking. So let's just copy that to here. Save that, and now when I save this file, as you can see, it's created a CSS folder and it's output my nicely formatted one with a map file just here, and then it's also done my production one that's minified and doesn't have any map file associated with it at all. So the first extra setting I want to touch on is exclude list. So what you can do is exclude a folder, file, or many files just using a glob pattern. Obviously, I won't go on glob patterns too much here, but let's just add the exclude list. By default, it just ignores these two folders, and we will just say that, as you can see on the right hand side, we've just got this exclude me folder, so we can just say, yeah, everything that's in the exclude me folder, you can just ignore. And we also have the exclude me file, so let's just quickly say we want to exclude that. It's in the styles folder. It's called exclude me.scss. Save that, and now when I go to save this file, as you can see, it's not output anything. Obviously, I could then again say, no matter what folder it's in, to exclude it again, and as you can see, it's still not excluding it. But yeah, if you want to touch on this or the next two settings we're going to talk about, definitely recommend looking into glob patterns. So the next setting I'm going to talk about is include items. So it works in very much the opposite way to exclude list, but let's just add in include items. It just expects an array. So let's just say that we're going to just focus on our main file in our styles folder. So let's just say styles CSS. There we go. Save that. Now again, when I go to save this file here, it won't compile. When I go to save this file here, again, it's not compiled because the only file that it's actually going to watch and compile is the one in this include items. So when I go to save this file here, there we go. It's now output the necessary CSS files just on the side here. So it works very well when you just only want to compile when there's one specific file out of many that you actually want to output. So the last setting I'm going to talk about is partials list. So by standard convention, a partial file in SASS, it always starts with an underscore. Obviously, you're going into a new project, or you've already worked on you've already built out all these partial files that don't match this underscore pattern. That's absolutely fine. This is where partials list comes in. So it just means that you can say, well, instead of a file starting with an underscore, all my partial files actually reside in a folder that matches this partials folder just here, for example. To get the most out of the setting, I'm just going to get rid of that one. And let's go and add partials list. Again, as you can see, by default, it's set up to watch any file and that's in any folder that starts with an underscore and has the .scss file extension or .sass file extension. So let's just say that I only care about partials, any file that's in the partials directory. So let's save that, and now when I save this variables file here, what it's actually going to do is output every other file in the project. Whereas if I was to just, let's get rid of these, delete those. Now let's just get rid of that setting again. This time when I go to save it, obviously it thinks it's a normal file, so it's ended up outputting just blank files because there's actually no CSS to output there. So that's it, at the end of my little quick guide on how to get started with the extension. There are obviously a few more settings, a lot of commands, and some features that I could go on, and I have in a separate video. I'll just leave a link in the description and at the end of this one, and if you wanted to go and check that out. But yeah, I hope you found this useful. Hope to see you in the next one, and yeah, bye for now. Bye.